The crystal flute shook slightly in Serena Vaughn's hand as I walked toward the microphone, the sound of gravel crunching under my shoes loud in my own ears. Her smile was immaculate, rehearsed to perfection, but her eyes betrayed her. They flicked toward me, widened, then hardened as if she could will me to disappear. Her groom, Caleb Vaughn, my younger brother and the man now occupying the corner office that once bore my name, remained blissfully unaware. He stood tall, chest out, basking in the glow of applause from the last toast, never noticing my attorney slip through the crowd and quietly press a slim folder into his hand. The late afternoon sun painted the hillside estate gold, the same land our father had purchased decades ago, when the company was nothing more than a desperate gamble and a folding desk. Serena had just raised her glass and spoken about courage and new beginnings, her voice echoing over 200 guests who believed they were witnessing a perfect ending. I wrapped my fingers around the microphone and waited. When the murmurs faded, I spoke, calm and measured. "You stole a company," I said. "You married a lie, and tonight I took it all back." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush bone. Caleb's smile collapsed as he scanned the document, his confidence draining with every line. Immediate termination for cause. Asset freezes across all domestic and international accounts. A 48-hour deadline to vacate every Vaughn Consulting Group property. Serena's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the stone terrace, champagne bleeding into the cracks like a stain that would never quite wash out. Gasps rippled through the crowd as whispers spread faster than the evening breeze. In that moment, something unfamiliar settled inside me. Not triumph, not rage, stillness. The kind that comes when chaos finally aligns into order. For the first time in over a year, my thoughts were quiet. The noise that had haunted me since my father's death simply stopped. I stood there watching two people realize that the ground beneath them was gone, and I felt peace. My name is Elliot Vaughn. I'm 45 years old. I am the eldest son of Thomas Vaughn, and until 14 months ago, I was the chief executive officer of the global advisory firm he built from scratch. My childhood was less about play and more about preparation. Dinner conversations revolved around contracts, ethics, and consequences. Success wasn't celebrated unless it was earned cleanly. Failure wasn't punished unless it was dishonest. When my father finally stepped aside 12 years ago, the transition was seamless. Under my leadership, the firm expanded into new markets without sacrificing its reputation. Revenue grew steadily. Client retention reached historic highs. Our internal culture became a point of pride, something competitors tried and failed to replicate. We weren't just profitable, we were trusted. That trust was the real currency my father cared about, and I guarded it fiercely. 7 years ago, I met Serena Caldwell at a humanitarian fundraiser in Geneva. She was 32, articulate, effortlessly charming, and working in brand development for a firm that occasionally partnered with ours. What began as professional admiration turned personal with unsettling speed. She understood how to listen. She asked the right questions. She mirrored my values so convincingly that I never thought to doubt them. Within 2 years, we were married. I believed I had found a partner who understood the weight I carried, someone who could stand beside me rather than beneath or above. Serena moved through my world like she had always belonged there. Clients adored her. Staff respected her. Even my father, notoriously guarded, spoke warmly of her. When she befriended my brother Caleb, I saw it as a blessing. He had always lived in my shadow, talented but undisciplined, desperate for validation. I thought she was helping bridge that gap. My father once told me, shortly before his death, that Serena reminded him of my mother. Sharp, observant, loyal, he said. That word still echoes in my head now, stripped of all innocence. For 5 years, I believed my marriage was unbreakable. We traveled constantly, hosted charity galas, sat on boards together, and built a life that looked enviable from every angle. Serena was my confidant. She knew my fears about failing my father's legacy, my anxiety about leadership, my private doubts. I trusted her without reservation. When difficult decisions arose, she was the first person I called. She knew everything about me. That knowledge would later become a weapon. 14 months ago, my father died suddenly from a heart condition no one knew he had. The loss cracked something open inside me. Grief blurred my judgment and dulled instincts that had served me for decades. Serena grew distant almost immediately, always distracted, always smiling at messages she wouldn't explain. Caleb began visiting our home more often, claiming he was helping manage estate matters. His timing was precise. He arrived just before I left for work, or just after Serena mentioned she would be home early. I encouraged the connection, grateful that the people closest to me appeared to be supporting one another while I struggled to function. 3 weeks after the funeral, Caleb walked into my office carrying paperwork and concern etched across his face. He spoke softly, carefully, said I was burning myself out, said the board was worried, presented a temporary executive delegation agreement framed as a standard safeguard. 3 months, he said, just enough time for me to grieve properly. He invoked our father's wishes, said Dad would never want me destroying myself in the name of strength. I hesitated, but grief makes even the sharpest minds dull. I signed without reading the fine print, a mistake that violated every rule my father had ever taught me. That same week, Serena left a folder on the kitchen counter. Divorce papers, no conversation, no warning, just sterile legal language and a single sentence written in her handwriting saying she had outgrown the marriage. When I confronted her, there was no anger in her voice, no regret, only detachment. I was too shocked to fight, too proud to beg, too consumed by grief to question the timing. I moved into a downtown apartment, telling myself I needed space to process losing both my father and my marriage. 2 weeks later, Caleb called an emergency board meeting. When I arrived, the room was filled with unfamiliar faces, consultants, advisors I had never approved. Caleb stood confidently and announced he was invoking full executive authority under the temporary agreement. Before I could object, he introduced Serena as the firm's new strategic communications director. She entered wearing confidence like armor, her hand resting on his arm. That was the moment the truth became undeniable. My brother had taken my company, my wife had chosen him, and I had signed away my power at my weakest moment. Their engagement announcement went public that night, carefully curated photos, a caption about growth, courage, and leaving the past behind. I was erased from my marriage, my company, and my own story. For 3 months I disappeared. Friends called, colleagues emailed, industry peers reached out. I answered none of them. The assumption was simple. I was broken, drinking, spiraling. That assumption gave me exactly what I needed: time. I wasn't falling apart. I was planning. On what would have been my father's 73rd birthday, I visited his grave alone. As I stood there, my phone buzzed with a news alert announcing Vaughn Consulting Group's rebranding under new leadership. The accompanying photo showed Caleb and Serena cutting a ribbon beneath his name etched into stone. Something shifted inside me then. Not anger, clarity, cold and precise. They had forgotten something important. I was my father's son too. I contacted Helen Mercer, my father's longtime attorney who had retired shortly before his death. She reminded me of a buried succession safeguard my father had inserted decades earlier after a hostile takeover attempt. A reversal clause allowing any executive authority transfer made under emotional duress following a family death to be invalidated unless unanimously approved by the board. Caleb never had that approval. It had been rushed through with abstentions. The clause had never been triggered before, until now. Over weeks, I gathered evidence meticulously. Private investigators documented the affair between Serena and Caleb dating back months before my father's death. Financial auditors uncovered misuse of company funds for secret trips and gifts. IT specialists traced unauthorized access to confidential client files using my credentials. Board members sidelined by the new regime provided internal memos showing systematic dismantling of my leadership team. Every piece fit together like a puzzle my father had designed for me to solve. The final piece came unexpectedly. My father's former executive assistant contacted me with a sealed envelope he had instructed her to deliver only if leadership ever changed under suspicious circumstances. Inside was a notarized document, a second will executed more recently than the public one. It explicitly stated that control of the company could not transfer from me without unanimous board approval and a 6-month transition period. Neither condition had been met. Armed with that arsenal, I filed for private arbitration under the reversal clause. Proceedings unfolded quietly while Caleb and Serena planned their lavish vineyard wedding. 2 months later, the ruling came down. Full restoration of leadership. Caleb's termination for cause. Immediate asset freezes. I waited. I wanted witnesses. The wedding day arrived flawless and extravagant. I attended sober, calm, and composed. The vows were nauseating in their hypocrisy. Promises of loyalty spoken by two people who had built their relationship on betrayal. When Serena raised her glass to toast new beginnings, I stepped forward. The judgment was delivered. Security moved in. Phones confiscated. Locks changed. Servers secured. By morning, the story was everywhere. In the weeks that followed, everything they built collapsed. Lawsuits, audits, public exposure. Their marriage imploded under the weight of it all. I returned to my office, surrounded by those who stayed. On the anniversary of my father's death, I brought 2 glasses to his grave. The board was set, I said quietly. The move just took time. Some call it revenge. They're wrong. It was restoration. And I reclaimed something more valuable than a company. I reclaimed myself.